In the last few hours since the release of the preliminary investigation into the crash of Air India 171, there have been some wild theories, a lot of bias, some brazenly incorrect claims, and only very little reasonable conversation. From speculation over suicide theories to charges of pilot error, we've heard it all. We've heard it all except for one fundamental question, the elephant in the room. Is Boeing going to get away while dead pilots who are not here to defend themselves are smeared with people's speculative theories? I'm Barkha Dutt. You're with the Mojo Story. On the program today, we take you deep inside the preliminary investigation report into the Air India crash, the CCTV video of which you're seeing on your screen. A journey that lasted no longer than 32 seconds from takeoff to crash. We know now from the preliminary investigation report that fuel was cut off to both engines, and this took place just seconds after takeoff. In fact, it took place as a result of the fuel control switches being in cut-off mode instead of in run mode. This is highly unusual and should never have happened. But the big mystery is who or what is responsible for these fuel control switches being in the cut-off mode. Based on the last conversation that took place between the two pilots, Captain Sumit and Captain Clive, we know now that the pilots noticed that these fuel control switches were in the off mode, in the cut-off mode instead of in the run mode. And at this point, one pilot said to the other, "Did you do that?" And the other pilot categorically said, "No, I did not." After that, the pilots responded swiftly, using the few seconds that they had to try and save the plane and their passengers and, of course, their own lives. In that time, the fuel control switches that were in the cut-off mode were brought back to the run mode. Some progress was made. Life was brought back into engine number 1, but engine number 2 could not contain the deceleration. And because the plane was at a low altitude, it crashed into the building, and the rest, as they say, is tragic history. The report also makes another very, very, very important point. It flags an advisory that perhaps none of us knew about. Certainly I didn't, but it now seems that pilots flying this plane did not know or were not made aware of this advisory either. In 2018, the FAA, that's the aviation regulator of the United States of America, and remember that Boeing is also an American company, and critics say that the lines are often blurred between the FAA and the Boeing company. In 2018, the FAA actually issued an advisory talking about how there is a problem with the locking mechanism of these fuel control switches. In fact, the advisory went on to say that if there was a kind of inadvertent problem, it could even lead to a situation as dangerous as an in-flight engine shutdown. That is clearly, by the way, what happened on Air India 171. But the question is, if this advisory existed, were the pilots aware of it? Every pilot I've spoken to says, no, we had no idea. Secondly, such an important advisory, why was it not issued as a directive? And thirdly, while the preliminary investigation report flags this advisory, it actually says that at this stage, nothing further is needed to be done vis-a-vis the fleet of 787, 1,200 of which are deployed worldwide. Since this report was released, leaving many more questions than answers, there has been a virtual smear campaign against the pilots who are no longer alive to defend themselves. There have been people who have suggested that one of the pilots may have been on a suicide mission. Others have said that pilots, even though they had years and years of experience, could have made a mistake and disabled them for a moment, that the mistake was made once, but twice. But those are the claims that are being made. And very few people are actually talking about what seems to me a commonsensical question. If there was an FAA advisory about a problem with the fuel control locks, why aren't we talking about a malfunction in the Boeing plane? Remember, after the 737 MAX crashes, Boeing actually blamed the pilots. And one of those pilots, by the way, of Lion Air was an Indian with an Air India connection. And it took a second fatal crash for Boeing to acknowledge its design flaw. A lot to talk about. Let me introduce our very distinguished guests today, all experts in their own field. One of them, a friend and batchmate, or rather, he learned his flying from Captain Sumit, so has a very personal relationship with him. Three very distinguished guests. I want to introduce Captain Sanjay Gupta, who's a senior former pilot with Air India over many years. Good to see you, sir. Good evening. I'm joined also by Captain Manmanth. Captain Manmanth is not just a former 787 captain. Captain Sumit was his mentor. He trained under Captain Sumit, who is today being accused randomly and loosely of all kinds of things. And also joining me is Captain CS Randhawa, who of course is a senior pilot who is president of the Federation of Indian Pilots. Welcome to all three of you. I want to get first reactions. I will start with you, Captain Manmanth, because this is personal for you. You trained under Captain Sumit. Today, Captain Sumit's talents, his skills, his integrity even are being questioned. Some are speculating on a suicide mission by one of the two pilots. Others are saying, oh, galti se unhone fuel switch off kar diya. People who fly will tell you that there's no reason for a pilot's hand to go to the fuel switch after takeoff. There's no reason for your hand to even be there. I'm not a pilot, but I've researched this enough. Your first thoughts as someone for whom this is a very personal loss. You learned your flying from Sumit. Manmanth. I can't hear you, sir. Hang on.
Yeah, good evening, ma'am. Two of the big giants are on screen today with Captain Sanjay Gupta and CS Randhawa. I know they are the big giants of Air India training. So speaking in front of them itself is I'm a little nervous because they're too experienced to I be speaking because I was when I joined as a co-pilot. The P2. I flew under their command for 2 years.
I'm so sorry, I can't hear Manmanth. Manmanth, I'm not able to hear you. Okay, I'm going to move on here. There's some. Uh, let me just put this in context. Captain Manmanth is someone who has trained under Captain Sumit, who was the commander of AI 171. We've all seen those ever smiling pictures of Sumit, and today God knows what his aging father must be feeling to hear the kind of things that are being said about him. Let me bring in the seniors at this point while Captain Manmanth tries to reconnect. Captain Randhawa, I'll start. Captain Randhawa, I'll start with you. Your first thoughts on the kind of speculations that we have actually seen since this report was published. All right, I'm obviously not having a great day with technology. So, Captain Gupta, I'll come right to you as we see the sequence of events on our screen. Let me start with you. A lot is being said about this report that leaves more questions than answers. What are your top thoughts, Captain Sanjay Gupta?
First and foremost thing,
Hang on, Captain Randhawa. I just went to Captain Gupta, so I'll come to you right
okay.
after that. Captain Gupta, go ahead. Yeah.
Hi, Barkha. Good evening to everyone. It's really sad the way things are moving, and especially this report which has come out at 1 a.m. for some unknown reasons. It is really sad to look at this report, which, indirectly are hinting at the pilot's problem. And I can make out, a couple of points which I would like to emphasize. They could have put a stamp of time when the pilots talk to each other about who switched off the engine.
Yeah.
That is possible through the CBR. Second is who asked whom. That names should have been put up. That would be easy to diagnose as to who was actually flying. So a lot of data is missing from this particular report, and it's not a very comfortable feel for any pilot who's flying today in India or abroad.
Yeah. What is the most disturbing part of this for you, Captain Sanjay Gupta? One is that, as you said, that there's an insinuation that the pilots were to blame, but it doesn't say it openly. It's very open-ended language. It only says that one pilot says to the other, did you cut off the fuel switch? And the other pilot says, I did not. Right? So the pilots refute this. We also know that both pilots spend the few seconds they have in the air to bring the fuel switches back from cutoff mode to run mode. One engine even starts recovering. If they had been at higher altitude with no buildings, I think the plane would have survived and not crashed, which is also something nobody wants to talk about. What you said, it's a very sad and upsetting day for pilots across India. What for you is the most upsetting dimension of what has unfolded?
So this is one point which I have observed is they could have said so-and-so pilot spoke to so-and-so. I mean, both of them who spoke to whom at this time, which can be diagnosed through the CBR timing clock. Second is another very important thing which I want to bring to notice is on page 15, the second last point. At this stage of investigation, there are no recommended actions for Boeing 78 and or GE engine operators and manufacturers. This is something which I have never seen in a report. It is an indirect hint that the Boeing company and the engine is absolutely fine. That's an indirect way of saying that. So I'm of the opinion they should have also written no more further training for present pilots to fly the 787. They should have written that as well. So there is a lot of misleading and insufficient data and open-ended report, which indicates, of course, it can be read in all possible ways, but it is indicating that the pilot shut down the fuel lever, which I think is incorrect. And like you rightly said, the FAAIB clearly says that the switch can malfunction. And who in not a single pilot in this world will at 50 feet switch off the engines? Not in his regular system. No way the hands will go there. So I fail to understand as to what is missing, and they could have mentioned a few things in this report, which I'm sure is kept open-ended for reasons we all know.
What are those reasons? What are those reasons? Is the reason to protect Boeing?
You have been a journalist for so many years, Barkha. I don't have to mention that. What will be the company's share prices in case things are put in that manner? What will happen to the Boeing company itself? So there's a lot at stake.
Let's open this up. Captain Randhawa, before I come to you, Captain Gupta makes a couple of very important points that I actually agree with. One is that this preliminary report is absolutely almost giving a clean sheet, at least at this stage, to both Boeing and General Electric, which makes the engines. Why isn't it, for example, saying pending further investigation, let's not have new training on the 787, even if it doesn't want to ground the entire fleet? There's no recommended action, seems to be giving clean sheets to these big companies. Boeing has done this in the past after 737 MAX. After the first crash, it blamed the pilot, and then it took the second crash for Boeing to go back to the drawing board. And while it doesn't directly blame the pilots, there is a kind of insinuation or an open-endedness that leaves it open for anybody to draw the conclusion they want to. And the conclusions that are being drawn are crazy, wild conclusions, from suicide theories to all kinds of allegations ki galti se band kar diya and so on. As Captain Gupta just said, no trained pilot would do this at 50 feet. How do you respond, sir?
Okay, Barkha, good evening. Firstly, I'll address what my friend Sanjay said and what you have said earlier.
Yeah.
First and foremost thing, the prelim report does not directly blame the pilots of moving the fuel control switches.
Yeah.
I will just take you back to the report. By the timing, I will just refresh what I have to say. At 1338.33 the seconds is the V1, which is 153 knots. At 35 seconds, the rotation speed of 155 is achieved. At 39 seconds, the mode is transferred from ground mode to air mode. That is when the aircraft lifts off and the landing gear uncompresses. The wheels are compressed. So when the compression is off, that is the time it goes to air mode and there is a transfer of power. The speed has reached 180 knots at 42 seconds. So within 9 seconds of getting a V1 speed and from 7 seconds from the rotation speed, the aircraft has achieved a good acceleration speed of 180 knots.
Correct.
Now, the point to be noted that the gear has not gone up. Normally, the first action is that after the aircraft gets airborne. The pilot monitoring says positive rate, and the pilot flying says gear up. Now the gear has not gone up. That means something was going wrong with the engines. Though it has achieved a speed of 180 knots at 42 seconds. The
Hmm.
fuel control switches after 10 seconds have been recycled as per the report at 52 and 56, the left and the right. The left engine started picking up, the right engine could not pick up in time. Now at 0911, the DFDR shut down. So
Hmm.
now let us view it. Maybe they have not given the state of the engines after it has unstuck, it is rotated. It is not clear that what was the state of the engines. They're silent on it. They have just given a report that this thing has happened, fuel control switches. Now, fuel control switches, by the way,
Hmm.
they have got a guard. Firstly, on the sides of the fuel control switches, there is a metal guard so that
Yeah.
inadvertently, your cuff doesn't, your sleeves do not interfere with the switch. Secondly, it's a spring-loaded switch. When
Yeah.
you have to start the engines, you have to pull it. It's a spring-loaded. You have to pull it and then put it up to run. Similarly, from a
Captain Randhawa, we lost you at a very critical point, but I want to go back to those pictures of the fuel control switch if I can. We were just playing them. And take the banner off, please, so we can see them properly. Take the banner off. Whoever's on the banners, take the banner off. Right. So that's the fuel control switch there. And what you were just hearing, and play that again, please. Play those shots again. Play them in loop for a couple of minutes. Let's see what are these fuel control switches that everybody's going on and on and on and on about. That's what they are right there. And I think what Captain Gupta said, what Captain Randhawa is saying, nobody in their right mind is going to go and play around with these switches for the heck of it, right? And even as an accident, as is being implied by insinuation, why would a pilot's hand even go there after takeoff? Now, while Captain Randhawa rejoins us, let me get Captain Manmanth to come in. I'm really hoping we can hear you because you have a personal connection to Captain Sumit, and you've heard all the theories that you've heard today. Go ahead, Captain Manmanth. You've trained under Captain Sumit. Go ahead with your thoughts today.
Can you hear me, ma'am?
Yeah,
Yeah. Good evening, ma'am. Good evening to both the captains. You have bought in this panel the I think one of those most senior most trainers, Captain Sanjay Gupta and CS Randhawa. I'm sure even Captain Sumit must have trained under both of them. And they have trained me also as a co-pilot when I was a junior pilot. So I respect them. I highly regards to these two captains. And once in front of them, if I have to say something, I'm a little nervous about it. But what I would like to say, two fuel control switches, both fuel control switches. We don't touch them for anything or any situation. Only one situation we touch them when we have issue of both the engines thrust, both engine
yeah,
thrust.
yeah,
So both the fuel control switches moving and to cut off and coming on is only one situation. There are many other situations when you are airborne that you touch the fuel control switch. There are about 5, 6. When you have a engine shutdown, when you have an engine fire, engine severe damage, or if you're doing an off airport landing, but in the short finals we cut off the fuel control. So there are only 5, 6 situations. If you start analyzing, you will delete all those around 4 or 5 of them. You will only end up with one situation where both the thrust, you don't have both the thrust. Both engines are non-functional, or the thrust is below idle. Only then you go ahead with this two actions. There are two very important actions. Those are memory actions. That is, one is ram air turbine switch. It comes
yeah,
out automatically, but the memory action says you need to push it. So we first thing is fuel control switch cut off and then to run. And the second action is the ram air turbine, and then you have to wait it out for the engines to come up to spool up back. So the report says doesn't talk about anything about engines. They don't talk about any whether the engines were operating correctly. Were they producing enough thrust? The engines are failed, or any other related to anything related to thrust. They're not talking about anything else except fuel control
yeah,
switches were rotated. But that is procedure. That is what we've been taught, and that is what Boeing tells us to do. That is what our QRH says. So the way the report is put up, they directly somehow it makes a sense that the pilots were not in correct frame of mind. They missed out. The reflexes were not right, probably. They didn't understand the situation. Just in case they had a single engine failure, the other pilot cut off the second fuel control switch. But at 200 feet, we don't do all those. In case we have an engine failure, we don't do it at 200 or 400 feet. In
Yeah.
case we had fire or severe damage, there could be flames. Only after 400 feet, we do some. So there are some actions. So at 200 feet, 300 feet, we don't do all these kind of things. There's no time for this, except for the gear up to get the landing gear up. There's no other action below that. So the gear was not up. So there's some situation like Captain Randhawa said. There was definitely some problem with the systems, with the thrust, and if the fuel control switches have been rotated to cut off and to run, that means there was some issues with both the engines. And the only
No,
confusing part over here
but you see, Captain Manmanth, what the report is actually saying is the opposite. The report is claiming that seconds after the takeoff, the fuel control switches were in the cutoff mode instead of the run mode, and that is what stopped the fuel supply to the engines, and that is why the engines stopped. You are saying the engines may have stopped and therefore they were fiddling with the fuel control. You
that's
are
the
saying
only
it could be the other way around, which
that's
is
the
what the
other way
Boeing
around.
manual
It
asks
can't
you
be any
to
other way
do.
around. Right,
Right.
ma'am? That cannot be any other way out. This is the only way out. They'll touch both the fuel control switches. There is no other way. And because it's at 200 feet, there is nothing written in a QRH, no quick reference handbook for our
Yeah.
emergencies, non-normal situation. It doesn't say what altitude
So
you operate within.
you do not agree with the fact that the pilot's hand could have gone to the fuel control switch in any circumstance, but a double engine flame out, basically.
Double engine, correct. Double engine flame out, or there's some thrust below the idle. I don't. Whatever has happened, it's happened to both the engines. Otherwise, the rat wouldn't have deployed at what about 200 feet or 300 feet? That's what they say. So I don't know
Yeah.
who's trying to cover up here.
Yeah. I want to actually take this to Captain Sanjay Gupta, and read out I want to read out what the FAA advisory actually said, right? I'll read out the FAA advisory. Uh, just give me a second. I'm trying to find it on my phone, which has a lot of documents. Yeah. So, Captain Gupta, I'll just read out the operative part. It says the Boeing company received reports from operators of Model 737 airplanes that the fuel control switches were installed with the locking feature disengaged. The fuel control switches are installed on the control stand in the flight desk and used by the pilot to supply or cut off fuel to the engines. The fuel control switch is a locking feature to prevent inadvertent operations that could result in unintended switch movement between the fuel supply and the fuel cutoff positions. In order to move the switch from one position to the other under the condition where the locking feature is engaged, it is necessary for the pilot to lift the switch up while transitioning the switch position. If the locking feature is disengaged, the switch can be moved between the two positions without lifting the switch during transition. It goes on to say this could lead to an inadvertent operation of the switch, which could result in an unintended consequence, such as an in flight engine shutdown. This is what the 2018 FAA advisory said. The preliminary investigation cites this advisory, talks a little bit about Air India maintenance, doesn't talk about Boeing, and gives a virtual clean sheet to both Boeing and GE despite this advisory, which is an advisory and not a directive. In other words, the pilots may not have even known about it, which brings back exactly what happened with the 737 MCAS case, where the MCAS software was a problem in the safety of the 737, and the pilots didn't even know, and the pilots were blamed for the crash till the second crash happened. Captain Gupta.
Yes, ma'am. I also got it printed just so that I don't have to search for the mobile phone.
Yes.
And this page clearly says 7878 also is
Yeah.
having this problem.
Yeah.
So it is imperative. I mean, it says inspect the locking feature. This is again recommendations from, excuse me, FAA.
Yeah.
So, in other words, after reading this, I feel, that spring loaded stuff and all. So, on rotation, according to what I can think, since it's no more working, if this is what has happened, the fuel switches on rotation because the aircraft rotates till about 16, 17, 18 degrees, depending on what the situation is. the fuel control switches, if it is in this problem, would go back, is what comes to my mind. And the fact that they did not take the landing gear up, that means engine was giving a problem way before. That's why they got attracted to a bigger problem and landing gear got missed out, is what I presume again.
So you are
Second thing,
saying, hang on. You are saying
yeah,
that the engine would have given the problem before the fuel switch.
I can, look at situations and analyze with my experience. 36 years, Barkha, is not a
Yeah,
short time.
of course,
And
sir.
you get distracted with bigger problems. So if the engine is malfunctioning at that time, or there's a winding down of the engines, I will leave the landing gear, we'll handle it later. So I am presuming, again, with presumption, that there was a problem in the engine way before, and then they got distracted, of course, and forgot the landing gear, is what I'm presuming again.
Yeah,
Then, if you look at this report, there's one more line which I would like to draw. I think it was there in the morning, your video as well.
yeah,
Immediately thereafter, the engine 1 and engine 2 full fuel cutoff switches
yeah,
transition to run, from
yeah.
run to cutoff position.
Can we have that
Do
screenshot
not.
up? It's the first point of the report. It's the first point of the report. Yeah, go ahead, Captain Gupta. Yeah,
So they are using this word that the fuel cutoff switches transitioned from run to cutoff position.
yeah,
They are not talking of that the pilot did it. Okay, so it says transition.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so the DFDR would read out the electronic signal from that particular switch. So this is either on or off from the DFDR. So that can be through an electronic shutdown system. So we are presuming a lot of stuff, and that's why this transition is mentioned, so that it can be open-ended.
yeah. And the problem with that is, you see, if you don't know something, it's better to say the fuel supply did not go to the engines few seconds after takeoff. We do not know the reason for it right now. The problem is the report is so open-ended कि जिसको जो theory करनी है वो theory कर रहा है at this point. It's created a free-for-all in which these poor pilots are getting smeared. Now, I can see Captain Rakesh Rai also joining us, who's also commanded a 787. But Captain Randhawa, we keep losing you, so I want to let you complete your point first. You said, similar to what Captain Gupta is saying, that the report is silent on the health of the engines. You want to complete that
Absolutely.
point? Yeah,
Absolutely. The health of the engine is not mentioned at all. That what has happened. I am quite firm in my belief that there has been power interruption which has caused the EEC to
yeah. I think the power interruption that we're having right now is also with Captain Randhawa, who probably is joining us on a phone. We also seem to have lost Captain Rakesh Rai. But let me actually come back to what's emerging in this conversation. You all seem to be suggesting something that looks like a cover up. I don't know. Captain Gupta, would you go so far that Boeing is being, I don't know, is this protecting the big sharks while the small guys in this case are the pilots? Are you beginning to feel that? I can't hear Captain Gupta. I'm so sorry, I can't hear you, sir. I don't know what's going on today.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah. Go ahead, sir. Yeah.
Okay. So if they had put the CVR stamp time, they would have put the engine health, a
Yeah.
few other things which is indicative of that there was a problem with the pilots. Nothing has been put up, and the fact that one pilot asking the other, have you
Yeah.
switched it off,
Yeah.
is a clear-cut indication that there is a hogwash which is going on.
Explain
They
that.
should have mentioned a lot of things, is what I feel.
Hmm. Hmm. So you think that because there is no time-stamped conversation of the cockpit voice recorder or the CVR, there's a lot here that we don't know yet.
It is like this report is like 6 or 7% of the whole thing. So guessing it is open-ended. I mean, it's not at all a comfortable report to look at.
That's a very big statement. You say that this report is perhaps 6% of the whole truth. I want to get in Captain Rakesh Rai at this point. Captain Rakesh Rai, do go ahead. Your
See,
thoughts, sir. You've
based on
flown this plane.
based
You've
on
commanded this plane. You must
based
have
on just
heard
one
all day. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
based on just one sentence, did you cut it off? We cannot actually speculate what has happened. After this sentence was spoken, what has happened before that, and what kind of conversation happened after this sentence was spoken, that needs to be known. And that needs to be corroborated with the health of the engine. Only then we can come to a conclusion as to what has happened. Now, coming back to the service bulletin which was issued in 2018,
Yes.
the problem with the fuel control switch, it's
Yes.
appalling, actually very appalling, that it was an advisory. It needed to be mandatory. How can you have a fuel control switch issue being, communicated as an advisory? It's a very serious flight safety issue.
Yeah.
What were they trying to hide?
Yeah.
And whatever has happened immediately after the aircraft has got airborne, because it takes about 3 to 4 seconds for the rack to get deployed. And if you look at the picture of the aeroplane, which has come out in the report, the aeroplane is barely 50 to 80 feet above the ground and the rack is already deployed. That means
we can show that picture. Can you please show the picture from the third CCTV camera, which shows that the rat is deployed? Explain this picture. What do you see here, Captain Rai?
See, the aeroplane has just about got airborne. It's not even 50 to 80 feet, and the rat has got deployed. That means at the point of rotation itself, something has happened and both engines have gone off. If that has happened, if both engines have gone off at that point, just after rotation, the landing gear will not go up. Even if you try to retract the landing gear, it will not go up, because there is total electrical failure and engine failure and hydraulic system failure because of the engine power going off. So the gear will not go up in any case.
I think you're on the phone. I can't hear you now. I can't hear Captain Rai. I really can't hear Captain Rai. So let me try and summarize. Let me try and summarize what Captain Rai has said so far, which is also what Captain Gupta is saying, which is also what Captain Randhawa was saying, which is also what Captain Manmanth is saying. All four of them believe that there is a problem with the engines at the point of rotation. The report suggests that the engines developed a problem because the fuel switch was cut off. The captains, the trainers on our panel are saying it's the other way around. The engines would have given a problem first, and only then do we come to the fuel switch. Captain Rai, can you hear me? I can't hear you, sir. Can you reconnect, please? And in the meantime, Captain Manmanth, do you want to come in? I can't hear you. Yeah, now I can hear you. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, ma'am.
Go ahead.
Very rightly put by the senior captains. Exactly, everybody, every pilot I have spoken to, we all have realized that there's something wrong with the engines. That's why they've gone and touched the fuel control switches. Otherwise, we don't. And it's a spring-loaded thing. It's a spring-loaded switch. It goes into a slot. It doesn't inadvertently go down. You cannot just put it down. You need to lift it up to put it down. So there's no way, no pilot is going to touch the fuel control switch just like that. Never. It's never happened. Never. Nobody thinks about it. I remember the 2018 circular, ma'am, the advisory. Once the advisory came in, we did read about it. What as a pilot practices, what we did was we used to reconfirm during the engine start at the ground when you started the engines, when it's pulled it up, when we put the fuel control switch to run. So we actually did it to just to recheck. We kept it. We would do it two to three times, not to cycle it. Just check whether it is in the slot. That's what all our trainers used to say. Just recheck your fuel control switch is exactly in the slot or not. By by any chance it might be in the intermediate position, it might slip down. So you just recheck. That's what we did on our side as pilots. But then it's an advisory for the technical people to check out, because there can be, physically the switch can be in the run position, but internal parts, beyond that, the parts, what has happened, did those parts fail, and the physically the switches,
Yeah.
anything else happened, so we don't know, because they're not. And even the context, what they're saying, the captain said, who put the fuel control switch, there's
Yeah.
beyond that, there might be a context to it. The commander might be asking, while doing the dual engine failure procedures, the commander, the first of, the fuel control switches are generally with the P2, fuel,
Yeah.
at that time. So in case the co-pilot might have rotated the fuel control switch, at that point of time, the commander might have asked
So,
him
so I
something.
want to, yeah, I hear what you're saying. I want to take this back to Captain Sanjay Gupta, and I'm reading out now what the preliminary report. Can we just mute Captain Manmanth? I'm hearing myself speak. Okay, Captain Gupta, this is what the report says. This is what the report says on the FAA advisory. You read out the FAA advisory for us. Now let's look at what the report says on the FAA advisory. The report says the FAA issued special airworthiness information bulletin regarding the potential disengagement of the fuel control switch locking feature. The SAIB was issued based on reports from operators of Model 737 airplanes that the fuel control switches were installed with the locking feature disengaged. The airworthiness concern was not considered an unsafe condition that would warrant an airworthiness directive by the FAA. The fuel control switch design, including the locking feature, is similar on various Boeing airplane models, including part number 40L837-3D, which is also fitted in the 787 aircraft. As per information from Air India, the suggested inspections were not carried out as the SAIB was advisory and not mandatory. The scrutiny of maintenance records revealed that the throttle control module was replaced on the VT-A&B in 2019 and 2023. However, the reason for the replacement was not linked to the fuel control switch. There has been no defect reported pertaining to the fuel control switch since 2023 on VT-A&B. Now, Captain Gupta, this is kind of the point that Captain Rai was making before we got cut off, that he thinks it's appalling that the FAA issued this as an advisory and not a directive. By the way, Boeing is not even saying anything about this, right? So this is a redux and a replay of 737. What do you have to say about the way the advisory has been quoted in the investigation report, but no follow-up action, no instructions for 787, no instruction for Boeing, no instruction for GE, which makes the engines?
Barkha, is that there's a lot of things discussed, and the critical matter is that at rotation there was a problem with engine which looks imminent. And how did it happen? What happened? That is all not covered in this report at all. That's the most critical part of this whole thing. And no one is interested in putting up the correct information on this report. That would have sorted out 90% of the issues, and things would have been in clear. So CBR, believe me, is such a lovely digital equipment right now that you will even hear that the fuel control switches have been put off by the pilots. You will hear that click. It's so clear. These mics are so well designed. So all that can be discussed in the report. Of course, I'm expecting and hoping that the main report comes out fast and all this is discussed. And like I've seen in various forums, various videos, that nothing has been discussed about this problem. And this invariably, like I started with the 1 a.m. report release, I've never heard of this.
So, Captain Rai, I'm hoping you can hear me. In fact, some of our people in the audience are also raising the same questions that all of you are. Why don't we know more about the CVR recording? Why has only one sentence from the cockpit voice recorder been shared? Why has it been shared in an incomplete manner without context? You don't even know which pilot is addressing whom. So Saurav Vicious says the question is, why does the report only focus on a specific comment taken out of context in the pilot's conversation instead of releasing the whole transcript of the black box as an addendum? So Captain Rai, we had lost you when you were making the point that it is extremely appalling that the FAA issued this advisory on the problems with the locking mechanism of the fuel control switches, and not as a directive. And I'm imagining that just like in the 737 MCAS case, it would where the pilots didn't know about the MCAS, here too the pilots would not have known that there's any probable problem with the locking mechanism. Captain Rakesh Rai.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, sir. Go ahead.
Okay. I have flown all Boeing aeroplanes from 727 up to 787. Captain Rajiv Gupta also has flown
Yeah.
quite a lot of Boeing aeroplanes. All this while, till this service bulletin came out in 2018, we had never ever heard of this kind of a bulletin. The question arises, why did this bulletin come in 2018? In the bulletin, if you see, they have named a whole lot of aeroplanes to be checked.
Yeah.
If the same system is installed in all these aeroplanes, then something should have happened much earlier.
Yeah.
So it appears that there is a problem with the 787-800 Dreamliner, and to cover up this problem, they have mentioned all other aeroplanes that please go and check all other aeroplanes. Whereas in my career of close to 30 years of flying Boeing aeroplanes, I'd never ever come across this kind of a bulletin. So this bulletin has, in my opinion, definitely come out with respect to 787 aircraft only.
Well,
Now
it
comes
says
the issue of
it
there is
says
another
that
issue.
it's come out. Sorry, Captain Rai. It says the bulletin says it's come out in the context of the 737. But if we can please show page two of the of the advisory, could you please show me page two of the advisory? You see all of the other aircraft listed. Yeah, there you can see
Correct.
on the table, right? Now
Correct.
you are saying today, as someone who has commanded a 787, that there is a problem with the 787, and this is a cover up according to you.
Yes, there is a possibility. And also what people are not discussing is the issue of the thrust control malfunction adjustment. Now, what Captain Rajiv Gupta was
Sanjay Gupta,
mentioning,
Captain
Captain
Sanjay Gupta.
Sanjay Gupta, sorry, Sanjay.
Yeah.
What Captain Sanjay Gupta was mentioning is that transitioning from run to cutoff, it does not
Yes.
say that the thrust lever fuel control switch was cut off. Now, in case of TCMA,
Yeah.
when there is weight on wheels, the TCMA, there is a software in that called software 130 that monitors that the thrust has gone beyond the idle parameters. In that case, it commands the fuel to be shut off. There is a possibility that the TCMA, it's a software, any software in the world can malfunction. So TCMA has given a wrong signal at the point where the aircraft was getting airborne and the wheels were still on ground. Power has come back, aircraft has got airborne, RAT has got deployed, gear could not be retracted. So that also is a possibility because it has happened with all Nippon Airways aircraft in Tokyo when the engine got shut off on the runway. So that is also a remote possibility. So we have to look at all these things, based on just one statement that did you cut it off? We cannot come to a conclusion that the fuel control switch was cut off.
I want to
It will be
ask
just
all of you.
electronically transitioning. That's all.
We have seen since this report came out, and I'll start with you, Captain Rai. You've had, even before the report came out, the stage was being set, it seems, for blaming the pilots with selective leaks to Wall Street Journal, air currents, and so on. The report actually does not say that the pilots cut off the fuel switch. It just says the fuel switch transitioned from run mode to cutoff, and then it later says it transitioned back to run mode. To me,
Correct.
it seems the pilot would have taken it back to run mode, but it doesn't even say that. It uses this word transition. Now, my
Correct.
question to you is, we have seen the BBC today with a shockingly incorrect headline saying pilot cut fuel to engine, plane had no problem. We have seen the Wall Street Journal hint at the same. We have seen today people suggesting with no basis that this was a suicide mission by one of the pilots. Like you would have even seen those allegations. As senior pilots, trainers, what do all of you feel when your colleagues are spoken about in this way? I'll start with you, Captain Rai.
See, one British pilot went to the extent of saying today on one of the channels that the pilot's hands may have gone at different places on its own and he may have done it inadvertently. And he gave example of, he was a British military pilot. He gave example of one of his friends who was flying a Jaguar and then he went to fly Sea Harriers, and because of habit interference, he operated the wrong switch. Then I pointed out to him that, look, friend, this pilot was flying this aeroplane for close to 12 years and had 8,000 hours of flying. So there's no question of habit interference. And he was a Czech pilot.
Yeah.
He has been training people. So his hand would not go inadvertently to a place where it's not supposed to go.
That's right. That's right. And then
You
you
know,
hear these bizarre theories on suicide missions. I mean, I don't even know what to say to these theories. I mean, what do you say? Captain Randhawa, are you able to hear me? Do you want to come in on this?
Yeah, I can hear you, Barkha.
हाँ बोलिए सर.
Uh, I'm also of the same view that the report is totally silent as to what has happened after the rotation of the aircraft, and it does not say those fuel control switches have been operated by the pilots. Third point is the takeoff was being done by first officer, who
Yeah,
was the pilot flying,
yeah,
and pilot in command was the pilot monitoring. Now, at no stage there is any conversation. They have not given it in the CVR recording that who's talking about the fuel control switches, and were the controls taken over by the pilot in command. So these are
yeah,
a lot of questions which have to be answered before the investigation comes to some conclusion. The third point is we spoke a lot about this advisory circular of Boeing. This should have been, in my opinion, this should have been made mandatory so that all the 787s and all the 737s are checked for the problem in the fuel control switch. However, even if there is a malfunction, the fuel control switches on their own will not go to cutoff and on. And no pilot on earth.
we always lose Captain Randhawa when he's trying to make this passionate point, but I know the point he's making that no pilot on earth is going to go and fiddle around with the fuel control switches at low altitude, that too. And as far as I understand, you only need to, Captain Rai, please correct me, or Captain Gupta, you only need to use these fuel switches before takeoff and after landing, or am I wrong on this, Captain Gupta?
You rightly said, Barkha, that no one is going to even, touch those switches in flight.
Yeah,
Unless, of course, you have a dual engine failure where you have to recycle it in any aircraft.
yeah,
And obviously, it is as important and it comes as a memory item. You don't open the checklist because both your engines are gone and you have to get them back as soon as possible.
yeah,
So other than that, you never ever touch those switches. So that is sacrosanct in all the pilots. Even
yeah,
in my sleep, if you put me in the cockpit, my hand will never go there, is what I feel.
yeah. So
So it's
what is
as
it?
important as that.
So what do you feel then? What do you
I
feel
think
has happened?
so. You have rightly brought out this FAA directive,
Yes.
which is I'm guessing, again, this is my pure guess, that both the switches malfunctioned and the computer has put them off. And physically, we don't know where the switches were. It just says one pilot asks the other, "Have you put them off?"
Yeah.
So I'm guessing that the PIC, that is Captain Sabharwal, when the relight was required, he because he would have taken over controls, and the co-pilot Captain Clive.
Yeah.
So Captain Sabharwal would be asking Captain Clive, "Have you put them off?" and then on.
Yeah.
So that is misinterpreted according to my pure guesses, of course, because those
Yeah.
people would be able to take it in the correct direction, who have the
So
data with them.
so you believe, Captain Sanjay Gupta, that there was a software or an electrical glitch that has led to these fuel switches going into cutoff mode, which has stopped fuel supply to the engines. And after that, the pilots are talking about recovering from that situation, and that's how the switches come back on again in run mode, which is how they're found at the crash site. They're found in run mode.
So, because nowhere does it mention in the report that the physical switch has gone to off.
Right. What does that
So
mean? Can you explain this? Can you explain this a
this
little more?
this fuel cutoff switch, we call it the
Yes.
fuel cutoff switch, which we are discussing.
Yeah.
Nowhere in the report does it say that it has physically moved to off position.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of electronics which will shut down the engine with the fuel cutoff switch at run. The FedEx can switch it off. There are a lot of computers which will shut off the engine with the fuel control switch at run. So the pilot, when he at 50, 80 feet is what we are presuming, it's going to be really sad. Your full attention is going to be on how to relight those engines. So the
which
best
they
way
tr-
is to put it.
which they try and do, which by the way they try and
Yes,
do for all those who are talking this nonsense about a suicide mission. The pilots,
suicide.
I know you've
If the
heard this.
pilots, if the pilots were on a suicide mission, why would they relight the engine?
Exactly what I was going to say, that this garbage about a suicide mission, with respect to
If,
all those who are promoting this theory, the pilots are trying very hard to start the engines again. It's clear, even in this report.
so if they were on a suicide mission, why would they relight the engine? Simple and straightforward.
Exactly. Exactly. Absolutely.
So
Exactly.
that is rubbish according to me. Rai wants to say something.
Yeah, Captain Rai, go ahead.
See, the cockpit has got two mics, cam 1 and cam 2. Now, the report says pilot 1 and pilot 2. It does not identify which pilot. Now, it's very
Yeah.
easy to find out which mic has picked up what conversation, and based on that, you can find out who is that pilot. And also, the voice of the pilot will be very clear. It is Sumit's voice or the co-pilot's voice.
Yeah.
So it's very easy to determine as to who said what. But the report says just pilot 1 and pilot 2. Based on that, we are not clear as to what has happened. And what Sanjay brought out very clearly, that nowhere it says that the fuel control switch was cut off. It just says the fuel control switch transitioned from run to cut off and back from cut off to run. And what he
So what
brought
is
out very nicely, I appreciate that point of yours, Sanjay, is
yeah.
that the conversation could have been this, that, when trying to relight, the pilot is asking, did you cut it off? And then try to rerun it. So that could be
I
a
see. This is
direction
a
they were
very
trying to,
important point. You're
yeah,
saying that you're saying that basically they were trying to reset the engine, in which
correct,
case the conversation could have been, okay, have you cut it off to run it again?
correct.
Right?
Sanjay brought it out very nicely. Yeah, that's a very, very valid point.
Yeah. So both of you are convinced, before I come to Captain Manmanth and then we'll take last comments. Captain Wright, do you believe the engines flamed out first, or do you believe the fuel switches malfunctioned, leading to a cut in fuel supply to the engines, and then the pilots try and revive the situation by physically bringing them back to run mode? Captain Rai?
See, the fuel system was cut off for whatever reason. That is why the engines failed.
Yes.
It could be
Yes.
because of any software glitch or any kind of. There's so many softwares in the so many computers in the aircraft. Anything could have cut off the fuel supply. So the engines have failed at the time of liftoff. There is no doubt about that. That is why the RAT has got deployed.
Yeah. But have the engines failed because on their own, or have they failed because of the fuel control switch malfunctioning?
Whether the fuel control switch has malfunctioned or the software has commanded fuel to shut off, we do not know. The report is not clear on that.
So you are saying the software could be a glitch or a sabotage?
Difficult to say. Till the time the whole cockpit voice recorder is played and the engine parameters are looked at, it's very difficult to say.
So you are
There was
not ruling out sabotage?
very difficult to say for me.
Before I give Captain Sanjay Gupta the last word, Captain Manmanth, you've been hearing as a young pilot who trained under Captain Sumit. When you hear all these things that are being said about him and Captain Clive today, what would you like to say to people?
Ma'am, thanks to Captain Sanjay and Captain Rai. Both of them have put it very correctly. That's what I was telling you initially. The conversation can be very contextual, because it could be half of the conversation. If they're going ahead with the procedures, it could just be the half procedures which has been produced in front of us. No, they have not completely produced the entire conversation. So it
Yeah.
is just one sentence. Somebody wants to get away. Definitely it is. Ma'am, it's very simple. There are two valves. One is in the wing. That's called the spare valve. There's one. Another is in the engines. The spare valve generally it's controlled by the fuel control switch. But the engine valve is controlled by the EEC. That's called electric engine control. That's a computer. The computer decides when to open it, when to close it, when to ignite the engines, when to start it. So it's very computerized. Everything is all computerized and electronics. So we don't know physically the fuel control switches were put to cut off and then to run. If it is physically moved, then it is definitely we had two engines issues. They did the procedures. It's not about hard work or anything. Whatever these senior captains sitting in your panel, they've taught us these are the things. We're just following the procedures which we've learned, we have practiced for years and years together to be safe. And if you come up with a normal situation at 200 feet, which we have not trained, never ever thought of it,
Yeah.
it could happen. So if both the engines are going at 200 feet, or any which ways, your concentration is just going to go for the engine power, engine thrust. It's not going to go for the
Yeah.
landing gear. So they did their procedures. They did try to relight it. And these suicidal things, these kind of things, these are conspiracy theories. They want to catch headlines. They want to talk
Correct.
rubbish. I know it's a sad day for Indian pilots, Indian aviation. We didn't want this kind of reputations. People are there to just make up stories and get their shows going on. I don't know. Some of the captains of other countries are also, they're pointing fingers at our mental health.
Yeah.
What they were arrested, they arrested. What was their family background? What is this? They're all talking about all kind of stuff. They've got time offs. Their life is very stressful. They're going all into all suicidal angle of it. They're enjoying that part to discuss. It's a sad day, definitely. With this kind of incomplete report, this is very irresponsible. Every pilot right now, which I have spoken to my batchmates, they're all completely demoralized. This report has further demoralized them. They've raised more questions than answers. It's not going to help them. So very sad day with this kind of report, and especially when they're putting an angle of suicidal with such great pilots, such well trained pilots. I completely doubt. I can vouch for them. They aren't going to touch the fuel control switch without any reason. I'm sure they did the right stuff. Boeing has to answer what happened to the fuel control switch and the valves. One of the valves are totally controlled by the computers. So did that shut down? Did that computer glitch happen, like Captain Rai just said? So
Yeah.
a lot of questions to be asked, and somebody's trying to save themselves. Billions in stake. Names are in stake.
Absolutely.
Lot of we are just small pawns in them. We
How
don't matter to
sad.
them. Yeah, we
How
just don't
sad.
matter to them. So it's they're just playing around with us. That's it.
That's very sad to hear. I can only imagine what you all are facing and feeling today. Captain Sanjay Gupta, I want to give you the last word to come back to the technicalities. I think all of you believe that the report has left room for innuendo, speculation. It is incomplete. It is quoting one line from the cockpit voice recorder. Nobody has come out and conducted a press conference and actually explained what do they believe, what do they not believe. We are all speculating. Where are the investigators? Let the investigators come out and do a press conference before the public of this country. They owe it to the people of this country. They owe it to the families of the passengers who died on board. They owe it to the families of the pilots and the crew. Please explain your findings. Don't let us speculate. Explain your findings. Take our questions and explain your findings. I want to ask you, Captain Gupta, what I've understood is you have said, A, you feel that this is skimming the surface. I think you said it's 6% of the truth. There's a lot we don't know. B, you said, as Captain Rai said, the CVR, the cockpit voice recorder, is quoted one sentence. We don't even know, is it Sumit asking Clive or Clive asking Sumit, because Captain Clive was taking off, but the senior commander was Captain Sumit. Three, you make the all important point that this line that's being quoted everywhere, did you cut it off? No, I didn't, could have been in the context of two engines flaming out and them needing to fix the fuel switches from cut off to turning them off and bringing them back on, or indeed the switches could have malfunctioned and they're trying to revive the engines. And the report actually says engine 1 shows progress, engine 2 doesn't. It doesn't manage to contain the deceleration. And perhaps if the plane had risen higher, even on that one engine making progress, the pilots who were revived the engines would have managed to save this plane if there hadn't been a building right there that it crashed into, right so close to the airport. So last word to you, Captain Gupta.
Yes, Barkha, it is a sad situation altogether. And since, like you rightly said, transparency is missing, and an ideal thing would be to make a press conference. This
Yeah,
report is even not signed by anyone. So tomorrow they delete it from the website. I'm
yeah,
sure you would have taken the report from the website. It's not given to any media, outlet or
yeah,
something, whatever, the press club or something. I don't know what happens. So
yeah,
it's like, you just release it quietly in the night at 1 o'clock, and everyone wakes up with that, and half information or less than half information. Like in the press, you want to favor someone else. What happens is you just take some of those clips and show it, in the favor of the other party.
yeah,
So this is what is happening, is what I feel. They should have, because it's imminent that there was an engine problem after we won, is what I'm looking at situations. V1 is the speed where you reject or take off. So after V1, there was an engine problem which they started focusing on, got airborne, and the rat has come out at 100 and some feet or 200 feet, whatever. That means there was a problem in both the engines. Now, what happened, why it happened, but putting just one line is something which is not good at all. It is just putting a kind of information that the pilots might have put the switches off. And that's why this word transitioned. It's not, it was cut off by the pilots. No word is mentioned there.
yeah,
It
absolutely.
transitioned from run to cut off. That's why
Yeah,
this is open ended. It can be, looked at in all possible ways later on.
yeah. Uh,
Sad.
it, it is sad. It is sad because I the report doesn't directly hold the pilots responsible, but it is so broad based and vague, if I may say so, in its language that anybody can take away whatever it needs to from this report. And the second point is that the advisory by the FAA, the American aviation regulator, on the fact that multiple Boeing planes have a possible locking flaw when it comes to the fuel switches is just treated in a sort of in the passing way, and there is no explanation for why this advisory was not a mandatory directive, and there is no explanation why the investigators are now not asking for a temporary pause. I don't want to be alarmist, but a temporary pause or some sort of explanation is being sought from the 787 manufacturers, which is Boeing, And please let me say in the end that Boeing has a terrible record. Its own CEO is on record before the US Congress and Senate admitting to security lapses. It has just paid to avoid penalty in US. It has paid the Trump administration. It has a terrible record of the 737 where 2 fatal crashes took place before Boeing was willing to concede a problem in the MCAS, which pilots were not aware of. And we may possibly be looking at a similar situation here where an advisory lay buried somewhere without the pilots being aware of it. So many questions and such few answers. We leave it there. Thank you, gentlemen, for helping us answer some of these questions. It's actually what the investigators should be answering at this moment. And not being left to speculation, but we thank you for your experience in helping us decode some of these riddles. Unfortunately, more questions, fewer answers, and just terrible smearing of the pilots. It's really heartbreaking to watch. Thank you so much, Captain Rai, Captain Manmanth, Captain Sanjay Gupta. We'll reconnect with you. I hope more information will come that will give us something more concrete to talk about and ask you of. Thank you. Take care. See you soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.